Friends, my name is Darren Gerdes. Here are the three big stories for today. It is June 14th. So I already went in some great detail about the U.S. Ukraine peace security agreement. It's a 10-year agreement. I talked about it at great length in this video. So I'm not going to belabor that here. I'm going to talk about three big events that I think are kind of wave of the future. So first thing is Denmark has become the first NATO country to invest in the production weapons in Ukraine. So other countries have made things, lots of countries have made things in their own country and then shipped it to Ukraine. Here they're going to be buying it from Ukrainians who are making it in Ukraine. And that's actually a really healthy sign for the Ukrainian economy and their industry and their ability to be able to do things. Not getting it blown up will be important, but yeah, that's a good thing. Okay, so I think you'll see more of this as we move forward, but again, this is a very positive step. Okay, number two. So Putin gave this speech today, and I keep seeing these little flickers of, well, Putin wants peace, Putin wants peace, I don't think he actually wants peace. I think he wants the world to think he wants peace and that Ukraine's the bad guy because Ukraine's not willing to come to the peace table. But what does it mean for the peace table for him? In today's speech, Russia's authoritarian ruler, Vladimir Putin, offered a peace solution to the war he is responsible for waging. Now remember, he started it. He could end it tomorrow just by withdrawing from what he started, but he's not doing that. According to his plan, Ukraine must surrender even the land and the people he failed to occupy. That is the full territorial borders of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk oblasts. Now, they don't even control all of the territory. They all control big swaths of much of that, but they don't control all of it. They must surrender all of that. It also must shelve its NATO membership aspirations. They can never be part of NATO. But in fact, the only reason that they are or have been invaded by Russia is because they were not part of NATO. If they were under NATO's umbrella, this never would have started. Should Ukraine fail to accept these terms, the conditions will change. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that's not really by any stretch of the imagination a real peace offer. It's just not. Jason J. Smart concluded here, Putin demands Ukraine surrender more than 20% of its land as a precondition to begin negotiations. Now, does that make any sense to you? I mean, just think about this. As a rational human being, do you think that this sounds like a real negotiation for peace? Russia wants to regroup and rearm before continuing its stated objective of installing a pro-Moscow government in Kyiv. So getting a peace negotiation now that would pause the war would allow them to regroup and get a breather before coming for more. The war will only end when Putin is forced to end it. And I think that's right. Putin has appealed to arms, and to arms, that's where it'll be settled. Now, again, I want to go back to this. Putin demands Ukraine surrender more than 20% of its land as a precondition. Let's look at a map. Okay, so they're going to surrender maybe this much is what he's asking for of the land. What if Ukraine said, well, why don't you turn over 20% of your land and then we'll talk about a condition for peace? What if Ukraine was doing that to Russia? Would that make any sense? Not even 20%. Let's just say this area around as a buffer zone around Ukraine. Because what Russia did was they said, oh, we need a buffer zone. But then they made this part that was in Ukraine not a buffer, but actually part of Russia. And so now they need even more of a buffer zone or something. I don't know. But it's ridiculous. Russia would never actually go for something like this. And of course, neither would or neither should Ukraine go for something like that. Okay, last big story, and this is also very important. So Russia and the BRICS, so Russia is trying to use the BRICS as an alternative bipolar world, right? Like we don't want the world led by the US and NATO and Europe, which is what they call unipolar. The US doesn't talk like that, but the Russians also always do talk about this unipolar world and this international rules-based order that they control. So he wants to have kind of like what the Soviet Union once was, with a balance on the other side. And that would be largely the BRICS: Brazil, India, Russia, China. Now, India and China by themselves are pretty significant. India is the most populous country in the world, and China is just behind it. India just surpassed them not too long ago. And so they can throw some weight around. India has tried to be somewhat neutral, but they kind of lean toward Russia. So here, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, met with Prime Minister of India, Modi, in Italy at the G7. They discussed the development of bilateral relations and the expansion of trade, particularly in the context of the functioning of the Black Sea export corridor. Okay, so let's talk about this at the small scale and then at the large scale. So at the small scale, it would be a tremendous coup for Ukraine to create some kind of bilateral security agreement with India. I don't think India is going to go for it, but if they did have that, that would splinter away one of Russia's buddies. Well, okay, so buddy is too strong a term. The closest to Russia are countries like North Korea and Iran, and then maybe Syria. And then in the sphere are China in the next tier, and maybe India and Brazil in the next tier below that. Now, of course, the stands are somewhere in the second tier as well, the Kazakhstan and all the other stans, the former Soviet states. But yeah, India is not, I don't think, going to go for something like that. But India has its own interests. Part of India's interest is forcing it to be closer to Russia. So they're taking in all the cheap oil that Russia can throw at it. It's a symbiotic relationship. Russia needs to sell their oil. India wants to absorb the oil at a very cheap rate. And that's working for them. But India isn't necessarily on the same page with Russia in other things, and they could create some kind of deal. It's very similar to what's going on with Erdogan in Turkey. Erdogan is close to Russia, but he also has other interests that are not related to Russia. And so he can make a deal like he did with the Black Sea corridor with Ukraine as well. So we'll see which way that goes. But in the bigger picture, Russia really wants to hold the global south together. I talked about the Argentine president kind of leaning in on the Ukrainian side yesterday. And so most of South America, much of Asia, and most of Africa, many African states, are kind of in Russia's corner, or at least neutral. And so if Ukraine can pick off a country like India and bring it closer into its orbit, that would be a significant coup. Okay, last big thing here, Gabrielius Landsbergis. He is the foreign minister in Lithuania, and he put this out, and I thought, that's right. This is exactly what they're doing. What Russia's doing now is what the Soviet Union did then. You don't join the Soviet Union. And remember, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia were joined as part of the Soviet Union. They became part of the actual Soviet Union, not the Warsaw Pact. They invade you, send trains of your people to prison camps, hold fake referendum, and pretend to save you from Nazis by killing you, like these were real Nazis, but by killing you. Sound familiar? Moscow has been using the same script since the night of June 14th, 1941. At least that was the day for them. But the Russians are still using that same playbook. Okay, that's where we are with the three big stories. I hope those updates were helpful to you and help you understand what's actually going on in the war in Ukraine. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. If you're a patron of mine, remember, if you are a board level member patron, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be doing our Zoom meeting. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.